Music has always been a powerful influence on the youth. Rock and roll, in particular, stands as a rebellious expression to society. This genre has changed the world in ways that seem impossible for mere sound waves. From its roots in the 1940s to the pulsating beats of the 1970s, rock and roll has charted a course through time, leaving an indelible mark on every decade it touched. Understanding rock and roll requires a journey back to its origins. Each era brought something new. Each decade reshaped the genre in its own way. It's a story of cultural upheaval and technological advances, and it's one that continues to evolve today. In this essay, we'll explore rock and roll's evolution decade by decade. We'll see the impact of key artists, the sounds that defined each era, and the societal changes that were both influenced by and influential to the music. We'll end by connecting past influences to modern trends. So buckle up, we're about to take a wild ride through the history of rock and roll. David Bowie was more than just a musician, he was a fashion icon. His ever-evolving style set trends and broke boundaries. From Ziggy Stardust to the Thin White Duke, Bowie's personas were as influential as his music. He challenged gender norms and redefined what it meant to be a rock star. Fans around the world emulated his bold and daring looks. Bowie's music was equally transformative. His innovative sound and genre-blending tracks changed the music landscape. Collaborations with artists across genres expanded his influence. Bowie's work inspired countless musicians and continues to do so. His energetic performances and theatrical shows were revolutionary. Bowie received numerous awards, cementing his legacy in music history. Modern artists still draw inspiration from his groundbreaking work. David Bowie's legacy as a fashion and music icon remains unparalleled. His influence on pop culture is undeniable and everlasting. Even in his final performances, Bowie continued to innovate and inspire. Fans around the world continue to celebrate his life and work. David Bowie's impact on fashion and music will be remembered for generations to come. Pause 2S. In the 1950s and 1960s, long hair was a symbol of rebellion. The youth used their hairstyles to challenge societal norms. It marked a shift in cultural attitudes where fashion became a tool for self-expression. Long hair represented the changing times. It contrasted with the conservative styles of previous generations. The Beatles became icons of this movement. Their look signified a break from tradition. The 1950s were a time of great change for rock and roll. This decade saw the genre explode into the mainstream. Artists like Elvis Presley, Chuck Berry, and Little Richard became household names. Their music captivated young people and terrified parents. Elvis Presley, known as the king of rock and roll, brought a new level of energy. His swiveling hips and dynamic performances were electrifying. Songs like Hound Dog and Jailhouse Rock became instant classics. Elvis's influence was undeniable. Chuck Berry, with his guitar skills and charismatic stage presence, helped define rock and roll. Hits like Johnny B. Good showcased Berry's talent and became anthems for the youth. Little Richard's flamboyant style and powerful voice added to the genre's diversity. Rock and roll in the 1950s wasn't just about music. It was a cultural movement. Teenagers embraced the sound as a form of rebellion. The music challenged social norms and racial barriers. It brought people together and created a new sense of identity for the youth. The early 1960s saw the rise of the British invasion. UK bands brought a fresh take on rock and roll. The Beatles, the Rolling Stones, and The Who led this movement. Their music influenced artists and fans worldwide. The Beatles became a global phenomenon. Their Ed Sullivan Show appearance in 1964 was a turning point. The Rolling Stones became rock and roll icons. The British invasion profoundly impacted American music. It paved the way for future rock bands. The late 1960s were marked by the rise of psychedelic rock. This genre was characterized by experimental sounds, extended solos, and a focus on mind-altering experiences. Bands like the Grateful Dead, Jefferson Airplane, and Pink Floyd led the way. The Grateful Dead, known for their improvisational style, became a symbol of the counterculture movement. Their live performances were legendary. Songs like Dark Star captured the essence of the psychedelic experience. Jefferson Airplane's White Rabbit became an anthem for the era. Pink Floyd, with their elaborate stage shows and innovative music, pushed the boundaries of rock and roll. Albums like The Dark Side of the Moon and Wish You Were Here became classics. The band's use of effects and synthesizers created a new sound. Psychedelic rock was more than just music. It was a cultural phenomenon. The genre was closely tied to the counterculture movement of the 1960s. It reflected the desire for freedom and experimentation. The late 1960s were a time of exploration and change, both musically and socially. The 1960s were a decade of social upheaval. Rock and roll played a significant role in this revolution. The music became a voice for change. It addressed issues like civil rights, war, and personal freedom. Artists used their platforms to speak out against injustice. Songs like Bob Dylan's "Blowin' in the Wind" and the Beatles' "Revolution" captured the spirit of the times. These songs became anthems for the movement. They inspired people to take action and fight for their beliefs. Rock and roll was a powerful tool for social change. The music also reflected the changing attitudes of society. The counterculture movement challenged traditional values. It embraced peace, love, and equality. Festivals like Woodstock became symbols of this new way of thinking. Rock and roll was at the heart of this cultural shift. The social revolution of the 1960s left a lasting impact. It changed the way people thought and acted. Rock and roll was a driving force behind this change. The music of this era continues to inspire and influence generations. The early 1970s saw a shift in rock and roll. The focus moved from singles to albums. Artists began to create more complex and cohesive works. This era, known as album-oriented rock, brought a new level of artistry to the genre. Bands like Led Zeppelin, The Who, and Pink Floyd led the way. Led Zeppelin's IV and The Who's Next became iconic albums. These works were more than just a collection of songs. They were carefully crafted experiences. Album-oriented rock emphasized the importance of the album as a whole. Creedence Clearwater Revival, or CCR, also made a significant impact during this time. Known for their swamp rock sound, CCR brought a unique flavor to the rock scene. Albums like Cosmo's Factory and Pendulum showcased their versatility and storytelling. The early 1970s were a time of innovation and creativity in rock and roll. Album-oriented rock also reflected the changing tastes of the audience. People wanted more than just hit singles. They wanted immersive and meaningful experiences. This shift in focus helped rock and roll grow and evolve. In the summer of 1969, Steppenwolf's Born to Be Wild was released. At that time, I was in a U.S. Army helicopter unit stationed at the NHA Trang Air Base. Whenever our Hueys were up in the air, if a good song came on our AFVN, Armed Forces Vietnam radio, the pilot would plug us into the sound and we'd all sing to the song, especially this one. It was the wildest time of my life, flying at treetop level so that the bad guys couldn't shoot us. We'd fly past them so fast they could not aim and shoot. We flew in the Central Highlands region from the coastal regions by the South China Sea, all the way up to the border of Cambodia and Laos. We partied hard and sang loud with all that our hearts could bear. We never knew if we had another day of life, so we celebrated the one day we were living. Now I'm 73, and I'm looking back and wondering how I survived that war. Thanks to musical groups like Steppenwolf for entertaining us back then and giving us hope for the chance to see another day. Pause 3S. The 60s were a time of great social and political upheaval. Amidst the turmoil of the Vietnam War, rock bands of the era often made songs to support the troops, providing a sense of solidarity and morale. These songs became anthems for the soldiers, reflecting their struggles and hopes. Bands like Creedence Clearwater Revival, the Rolling Stones, and Jimi Hendrix used their music to capture the complex emotions of the time. Tracks like Fortunate Son by Creedence Clearwater Revival highlighted the unfairness faced by many young men drafted into the war. The Rolling Stones' Gimme Shelter painted a vivid picture of the chaos and fear, while Jimi Hendrix's rendition of the Star-Spangled Banner at Woodstock became an iconic moment of protest and patriotism. These songs served as a lifeline for soldiers in the field, offering them a connection to home and a sense of shared experience. Music became a powerful tool for expressing the unspoken fears and desires of a generation caught in the crossfire of history. Rock and roll's engagement with the troops during the Vietnam War era underscored its role as a voice for the voiceless. It provided comfort and a sense of unity, reminding soldiers that they were not alone in their struggles. The impact of these songs extended beyond the battlefield, influencing public opinion and becoming a key part of the anti-war movement. Rock and roll proved that it was more than just entertainment. It was a powerful force for social change and a testament to the enduring human spirit. The late 1970s brought the rise of punk rock. This genre was a reaction against the perceived excesses of mainstream rock. Punk was raw, aggressive, and rebellious. Bands like the Ramones, the Sex Pistols, and the Clash led the punk movement. The Ramones, with their short and fast songs, defined the punk sound. Tracks like Blitzkrieg Bop and Sheena is a Punk Rocker became punk anthems. The Sex Pistols, with their confrontational style, shocked audiences. Their album, Never Mind the Bollocks, became a punk classic. The Clash, known for their political lyrics and diverse influences, took punk in new directions. Songs like London Calling and Rock the Casbah showcased their versatility. Punk rock was more than just music. It was a statement. It challenged the status quo and gave a voice to the disenfranchised. The late 1970s were a time of rebellion and experimentation. Punk rock shook the foundations of the music industry. It paved the way for future genres and continues to influence artists today. Rock and roll has always been at the center of cultural clashes. It has challenged norms and pushed boundaries. From its early days, the genre has been a force for change. This has often led to conflicts with authority and mainstream values. Elvis Presley's controversial performances in the 1950s are a prime example. His dance moves were seen as provocative, parents and authorities were outraged. Yet, Elvis's popularity continued to grow. He became a symbol of youthful rebellion. The 1960s saw similar clashes. Rock and roll was closely tied to the counterculture movement. Artists like Bob Dylan and Jimi Hendrix used their music to challenge societal norms. Their songs addressed controversial topics and inspired change. The punk movement of the late 1970s took this a step further. Bands like the Sex Pistols directly confronted authority. Their music was raw and unfiltered. It spoke to a generation that felt marginalized. Rock and roll's history is filled with these cultural clashes. They have shaped the genre and its impact on society. Technology has always played a crucial role in the evolution of rock and roll. From the electric guitar to digital recording, advances in technology have shaped the genre. Each decade brought new innovations. The electric guitar, popularized in the 1940s, revolutionized rock and roll. Artists like Chuck Berry and Jimi Hendrix created new sounds. Amplifiers and effects pedals added versatility. The electric guitar became synonymous with rock music. The 1960s and 1970s saw further advancements. Multi-track recording allowed for complex compositions. Artists could layer sounds and experiment with effects. This led to iconic albums like the Beatles' Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. Digital technology in the late 1970s transformed the industry. Synthesizers and drum machines introduced new sounds. Recording techniques became more sophisticated. Technology has always driven the evolution of rock and roll. The legacy of rock and roll is profound. Its influence can be seen in countless genres and artists today. From pop to hip-hop, the impact of rock and roll is undeniable. The genre has left an indelible mark on the music industry and popular culture. Modern artists continue to draw inspiration from rock and roll. Bands like Foo Fighters and Arctic Monkeys carry the torch of classic rock. Hip-hop artists sample rock tracks, blending genres in innovative ways. The spirit of rock and roll lives on in contemporary music. Please subscribe to our channel for more amazing content. The Doors were a shock to many with their music that was poetry for some and wild performances that were great. Emerging in the late 1960s, The Doors, led by the enigmatic Jim Morrison, pushed the boundaries of rock music. Their lyrics delved into existential themes, while their live shows were a blend of theatricality and raw energy. Songs like Light My Fire and Riders on the Storm became anthems of a generation, resonating with fans across the globe. The Doors' unique fusion of rock, blues, and psychedelia set them apart from their contemporaries. Morrison's poetic lyrics and charismatic stage presence turned each performance into an unforgettable experience. The band's willingness to experiment with their sound influenced countless musicians and bands that followed. Even after Morrison's untimely death, The Doors' music continued to inspire and captivate new audiences. Their legacy is evident in the works of modern artists who draw from their innovative approach to music and performance. The Doors remain a testament to the enduring power of rock and roll. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more fascinating insights into the world of music.